Hi, this is Brian with King Grizzly. This tutorial is by request. I was asked, how do I put text over an image in Elementor? And it's a good question because there are different approaches. Like, do you use a negative margin? Should you use a background image? Should you not use a background image? I'm going to show you the most popular way I've seen, and it's quite versatile and useful. So you could use it for a hero panel design. You could use it for a loop item template design, like for a list of posts and pull in dynamic information for the text in the image, or just like a static design, like a multi-column layout. So let's take a look at how to do this. Okay, so here's the picture I was given. So I'm going to try to replicate this. And for this demo, I've just got an empty container here. And I'm just going to go with sort of a static approach. So I'm going to put another container inside. We'll give it a width. I'm going to give it a 30% width. I'll give it some kind of padding, background color so we can see the shape. Okay, and then I'll give it a border radius around those corners. So it looks like we've got some text, three bits of text, and then the background image. So let's start with the image. So the main approach I've seen, which I think works well in most cases, is just to go ahead and use a background image. So click on that container, go to Style, and click on Background, not Background Overlay. We're going to save that because we're going to want to dim it down with the background overlay. So let's go grab an image. I've got this one, which is pretty high contrast. So I'm going to select it. At first, when you insert a background image, it's full size, right? So it looks quite strange. What we need to do is limit the size. So I'll go to display size and choose, I like to choose cover because cover will actually cover the whole space. If I choose contain, then what will happen is it will fit the whole image in. If I turn off repeating, you can see what's happening here is it's fitting the whole image in, but no, I really need to cover. So I can do cover. Okay, so we need some text. I'm not going to make you watch me style the text, so I think I have some I can paste. There we go. So I put in a heading widget, and I styled the font size. And I basically put a heading widget in 3 times and styled it up to kind of look similar to this, right? One thing you'll notice is our text is not spaced out. How do we get our text to be spaced out? A few different ways you could do this. One is just to set a margin or a padding on one of these. So I could click on this middle heading. I could set a bottom margin, so some value, right? That's kind of cool because then on desktop, tablet, mobile, your different breakpoints, you can adjust that number to get the spacing you like. Now, if you had a very long heading, then what would happen is since it's a fixed number, 200 pixels, it's going to add 200 pixels below that. So like if this heading just kept on repeat, let's say it was a really long title, as is often the case, you can see that 200 just keeps on going down below. I think there's a better solution for creating that space. So I'm going to get rid of that. I'm not going to go that way. There's 2 other ways you could do it. The second, and this is not, in my opinion, the better solution, there is something called a spacer. I can put a spacer in. It's a widget. I can set that. Now I do have access to other values here, so I could maybe get creative about how I do that. Like maybe I use some CSS calc or something. This is nice because you can adjust the space per device size, but still that's not the approach I would use. What I would probably do is click on the container and I would set a minimum height. And now you can calculate that different ways. We'll just go with the pixel height here. Let's try like 360 pixels. We can adjust this again based on device size. You could also base this off of something like vertical height or vertical width if you're familiar with those. Excuse me, viewport height, viewport width. But what I like to do is then click on this heading here, go to advanced and choose grow. And it will grow to fill that remaining space. It's, in my opinion, superior to that 200 pixel approach because if I have a long heading, it shouldn't just keep on growing infinitely. See that? It's just going to grow to fill the space. Now, the card can still grow, but the combination of the minimum height plus the grow on that heading is a nice setup. The other thing we're missing is it's a little hard to read because the image is kind of has high contrast, it's sort of bright. So that's where we're going to go to the container. And I like to label my containers. I'm going to label this as a column just for my own sanity. I like to have a panel, a row, and a column sort of logic to my layout. So I'll click on this column. I'm going to go to Style, Background Overlay. And then we can do a solid color. So let's find like a black color, and you'll see by default the opacity is 50%. It already looks easier to read. I could play with that, slide it up or down. What I like to do, slide that up to 1 so I can't see, and then go to the color itself and use RGBA, where A is alpha channel, and we can play with that. I like to go that route instead. So I could find something that works well here, and we'll be close now to that original design. But you also can get fancier, could use a gradient. So I could use colors if I wanted to use colors, or I could just choose darks like this. Dark, play with the RGBA value for that. Maybe I want the bottom to be quite light, so it's almost full color. And then maybe the top one I want to be darker because there's text. I can adjust the angle of the gradient. I can choose a radial gradient if I want. I can choose linear or radial, and I can adjust the locations of where the gradients are happening. So it's pretty versatile. I like this approach to building. And then if depending on what you're up to, so if I'm building a loop grid item template, I'm going to have to standardize, right? But if I'm just building something like this, which is kind of static, then I can adjust per item. So I can choose my next image. Let's say I have a wider image like this. This is a wider shot. The cover will take care of getting this in the card, but I can see now, oh, the date's hard to read on this one. Or this player is not situated quite like I want. So I could then go to the container style, and I can play around with the position of that image. Center right. Okay, not quite good. Center. Oh, I like that better. Or even custom, I could experiment with sliding this player around. I have to be careful that I don't mess up the cover option, but I might be able to find something I like better by doing that. And I could also go to that background overlay and make some adjustments. Like maybe I could decide, oh, this one needs to be darker here because I can't read the date. So there are some kind of cool options relating to background overlay. There is the ability to also on hover make some changes to some background setting. It's fairly simplistic. You could also go to border and set some border states. So like if you wanted to have a border highlight when you hover this card, that's kind of a nice option. You can also go to advanced transform or motion effects and actually make the whole card sort of like scale on hover if you wanted to. So let's try that. So if we go to hover, scale, let's see if this works. 1.1. That's too much, right? But I could maybe do like 1.05 and experiment with some kind of fun interactive states. So I think this generally achieves what we were hoping for, and also across tablet and mobile, we can play with these. So if I need to make this wider, because now I need it to be about 50%, I can do so. And go to the other one. Percent. Come on. There we go. And then on the phone, I'd likely go to 100 and 100. And if I need to, I can click on that and make some adjustments in the positioning here of my image. And it looks like I can even adjust the location of the gradient per device size. So yeah, this is probably the most common approach for dealing with putting a text over an image. It kind of flexes depending on the design nicely, versus trying to use a negative margin on text or something that's absolutely positioned. I find this is a good way to go. Now, one other thing you could maybe do, depending on what you're designing, is sometimes you can get away with the call to action widget. I'll drop that in here. So this widget, if you click on it and you switch from classic to cover, it puts text over an image. And then you have the option of a title, a description, and a link. Now you don't have to use these. I think if you delete the text for the button, it hides. So if you just had like a heading and some text, you might decide that you like this widget. And you could use this widget inside a loop template if you wanted to, because you can map using dynamic tags. You could pull in the post title, and you could pull in a custom field, but you're kind of limited, right? So you could assign your featured image to be the background. You can even add a graphic element, I think like a little icon to the card. So that's another option, is you could put this inside a container, or you could even set a width on this. So I could go to the advanced width, set a width 33%, something like that, or I set mine to 30. And then I could fiddle with the settings and play around with the options that are available. There are some nice hover effects. I think this grow is way too exaggerated, but you can turn that off, and you can play around with the background. So that may work for a use case. It could be a little easier for a client to edit because they can go in and change these. But then again, on a page, it's not very hard to click on text and change it, or to click on the container and change a background image. And again, this approach works well. You can drop in different images and it will likely look pretty good just right away. And then it does give you the option to reposition depending on your image to get it to look right. And the other thing is, if you have an image that's darker, like this one here, this is already pretty dark, then it gives me the option to go to background overlay and back off these values some, because the image is already dark. I can add more transparency to try to get a balance here. So yeah, hopefully that was helpful. And if you thought so, please consider subscribing. And if you got any other requests, we love making these videos. So give us a challenge or a question. We'd be happy to make a tutorial if we know a decent answer. All right, thanks.